Right, okay.
Okay.
Well, to begin,
To begin.
we're with Jean Podesta, who is someone who worked at 33 quite a few years ago
Yeah.
in the film and video group.
Yeah.
It's the 9th of November 2023, and we're at Jean's house, which is lovely, decorated in pinks and all kinds of different colours, so it's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here to really ask you about your history with 33, which is quite a long one, and also to find out how you got there in the first place, and maybe a little bit about what you did afterwards.
Okay.
So if that's okay with you.
Right. Well, I started off life as Jean McClements in Luton, born and bred here. And I went to Stockwood and Halliard schools, standard state education.
And that's in Luton.
And that was in Luton.
Yeah.
I was fairly okay until my first careers day, when they asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, become an archaeologist and find Alexander the Great's body. And they sort of said, well, okay, have you thought of shorthand and typing or hairdressing? And so I knew I was onto a kind of loser at that point.
And when was this?
That would have been about 1967.
When you were
55, about 13.
13.
About 13.
Right.
And then I toyed with the idea of going to art school and ended up working in a hat factory. Then I worked at a place called BD Hats, where I became a trainee bookkeeper and learned bookkeeping. And this is all pre-computer, so it was all paper, double entry.
So was this in the late 60s or early 70s?
Early 70s.
Early 70s.
And
all in Luton.
all in
because
Luton.
The hat factory,
everything was
hat industry was in Luton,
worked for various other companies, learning payroll and more bookkeeping. Wandered off to London at one point and worked for Chubb Alarms. Had a bit of a blast.
Can you talk about that? Because it must be an interesting time.
Lived in Bethnal Green, on Bethnal Green High Road, which in a flat above a gay liberation bookshop, which I shared with a bunch of raving queens. And that was all around sort of, David Bowie, Roxy Music, T-Rex, all that era. Did that for a while.
So an alternative kind of lifestyle that you were leading when you were how old?
Late teens, early 20s.
Late teens and early 20s.
Yeah.
And was that a reaction against a family background, or is that just the way you always were, do you think? Or did you kind of learn that?
To some extent, I think it was always there. I mean, my mum and dad were very, very much in love, and my brother and I were kind of incidental to that in some ways.
Right.
So we had a kind of benign neglect in our upbringing, in that we had everything we needed, but they never tried to force us into doing anything.
Right.
My dad always said to me, if you've got a job and you don't like it, leave, you'll get another one.
Right. So would you say them as very liberal, or just they were just into each other and not particularly, they thought were obliged to have children, or what was the feeling of that?
Probably. They were young, they were in love,
Yeah.
they got married, they had children. Dad worked, mum worked, gave up work when she had kids. And for me, it was just a pretty normal, standard upbringing. There were no major problems. As I say, we were pretty much allowed to do what we wanted in terms of our direction. It's like my brother joined the church because he realised he got paid for singing at weddings in the choir. There weren't those kind of things involved, imposed on us, that you must have a religion, you must follow this path, you must follow that path.
What would you say your social background is? Working class?
Working class,
right.
Definitely working class.
But that was perhaps unusual for that time, being brought up in the... Early 60s, was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was born in 55.
Right.
To me, it was just normal.
Right.
We had aunties and uncles and cousins around, and you know, the family would go out and get pissed and have parties, set all the Christmas decorations on fire. To me, that was normal.
Right. But that was normal for you with children at school as well. You know, like if you went around their houses, was there any difference between the way you were brought up and most of your friends, for example?
Difficult to say, really, because most of the more long-term, sort of in-depth friendships happened when I was older, when I went to Halliard. Right. Certainly when we lived in Liverpool Road in the town, the whole family was always around all the time, so we didn't spend much time with other families.
Right.
So anyway, you know, sort of after London, was it after London or before London? After London, I came back to Luton for a while, reconnected with people. Then I moved off to Saffron Walden and Thaxted for a while.
What sent you there?
A man.
Right.
We'll leave it at that. Worked for another accountant out there and came back to Luton.
Did you have a qualification in accountancy?
No.
All right.
No.
So you were just being employed because you knew more for the experience than anything?
I mean, I was partially trained.
Right.
But I never took my exams.
Right.
So, you know, but I was a good bookkeeper. So I came back to Luton, and over the years, I mean, I've known Muddy and Paul for a long time.
But just to say, Muddy and Paul are in the room,
yeah.
So, and they all know you. They've known you for years, so.
And I can't remember exactly the sequence, but I know I came back and we were doing arts in the park and stuff at the Royal, the film club at the Royal.
So this was the early days before 33, the actual
so
building.
That probably
and the
happened
Arts Trust.
before I went off somewhere.
Right. Okay.
And then when I came back, you'd got the building, and Gavin was there, and I kind of came in and got involved. Got involved with Gavin. Started as a cleaner. Knew nothing about film and video at all, apart from watching it.
But it's a way in.
And yes, started working with Gavin on the film and video group and doing books and all that kind of thing.
So just explain, this is Gavin Hodge, who was employed, if I'm right, if someone correct me, as the first kind of leader of the film and video group at that time.
That's why you employed him, wasn't it?
Yeah. Was Dermot already there?
I was trying to
remember whether Dermot was there
Gavin.
or not.
I think maybe Dermot
It's
did.
I think Dermot did some workshops and then it professionalised, didn't it? And Gavin came in.
We can edit around this.
Yeah. And so sort of at the beginning of my involvement, I was cleaning. I was helping Gavin and Dermot, learning video, and then teaching Barfield video about a week or two behind where I was.
Right, yeah. So that makes sense. I mean, that's from what I've heard and what I know anyway of the place. It was very much people learning as they went along and not being sent off for any kind of training or anything like that.
No. Well, there
learning
wasn't
as you were
really
doing.
any.
No.
There wasn't really any training at that point.
So we were talking about
Yeah.
when you first started at 33, what it was like, and that you knew quite a few people there.
And it was one of the things about 33 is that it was always a very open but a very intimate place. Anybody could walk in there and start talking about something they wanted to do, and there would always be someone around to talk to, or somebody to say, oh yeah, well actually you need to talk to that person about it. And I don't think there was particularly a lot of separation between film and video and 33 in terms of titles at the time, because everybody just worked across whatever they could do and helped out wherever they could. Maybe I'm being a little romantic, but that's how it sits in my memory. And as time went on, and more, we were doing more things with people. We were experimenting for ourselves. We were doing things within 33, like Muddy dressing up in a uniform and us getting a wind-up penguin and invading the Falkland Isles in Guildford Islands in Guildford Street. And we played. We had time to play, I think.
And this was just to set the time, this was early 80s, 80...
It had been about 84.
I think the film and video group was started in about 82 or something. I think Gorillaz came along about 84.
Yeah, around about 82, I think, was when we started to get funding, or was it 84? I know it's on those sheets that I gave you somewhere.
But yeah, we can...
because I've got the dates of like when we first got visited by Gulbenkian and things like that.
But early 80s, that's when you kind of started to be involved with the actual group, 33, and then the video group.
Yeah.
So what started the conversation with a video group in the... Did someone propose to you that, you would help out or become an administrator, or what? How did it work?
I have no real answer to that.
Right. You just fell into it, perhaps?
That's how it felt for me at the time. And obviously I was involved with Gavin as well. And it just worked. It just worked. And also, there was Dermot, there was also Gary Whiteley, who had his outside job but did an awful lot within the group. And Gavin knew John and Tim, and we worked initially just trying to set up the film and video group, working with outside groups, facilitating their productions, doing things for the council like the carnival, stuff for the airport, things like that.
So who were just give me a rundown of all the different people involved in that group then, because you mentioned quite a few names. So there was Gavin, who, I know you started having a relationship with, but there was also Dermot
Byrne, who was the filmmaker, and then Gary Whiteley, as I said, was a friend and of many of us, and had his own talents. He worked on the oil rigs, and when he was back he would spend most of his time at 33 doing stuff at 33.
Right.
As did a lot of people at the time.
And then you mentioned Tim and John.
Tim Morrison and John Dovey.
Right.
Who were the other two members of Gorilla Tapes. Gavin knew them from stuff that he'd done before.
So Gorilla Tapes was an entity that was apart from the film and video group.
Yeah.
It kind of intersected, did it?
Yeah.
How did that come about then, and why did it come about?
It was part of the whole workshop movement across the country. There were many film and or video workshops across the country. Most of them were making primarily political statements. And it was with the advent of Channel 4 when they announced that they were going to provide workshop funding in return for product. And it was at that time we got involved within ACTT, the Film and Television Trade Union, to put it on a formal footing. And the end result of that was the workshop declaration, which was governed the criteria of a workshop, what it could and couldn't do within the eyes of the union, what kind of funding position Channel 4 would take. I couldn't find a copy of it actually, but it's quite a big document.
So this was a national thing that was
Yeah.
agreed through ACTT,
Yeah,
and you were involved in that? Or-
yeah.
Right. So by that time you'd become a member,
Of
or all of you
33.
members? Or 33 had become a member as a group?
No.
Right.
Film and video was running,
Mm.
and we wanted to get a chunk of this funding. You know, we were getting predominantly Arts Council, Sun Council and BFI money,
Mhm.
but in order to do more we needed more money, more equipment, and equipment was always a big issue,
Yeah.
actually getting.
Because you started off with, I mean, I know this, but you started off with second-hand equipment from the 1970s,
I think so.
recycled, as well as hundreds of tapes that had already been used by a previous company.
Yeah.
So all of that was in place when you started, was it?
Yes.
Right. So you didn't.
I'm
you
not
weren't
sure
involved in
exactly
securing
what
that.
had come from Gulbenkian at that point.
Right.
But in those early stages as well, we were involved in, like, the film room needed Faraday caging, so we did that. We started to build the edit suite for the film and video, and we knew what we wanted. We wanted a low band dramatic edit suite. And so, you know, because of that, we got involved in the work. We were already in touch with the wider workshop movement, and we got involved within the union, and I ended up on the negotiating committee for the workshop declaration. And we got that passed, we got that all in place, and the funding programme began, and that's when we started getting, you know, money and equipment from Channel 4. Obviously, the more we could do, the more we were wanting to do things, and I really don't know how Guerrilla tapes came about. It was probably a drunken conversation in the pub when we said, should we do this?
Right.
And so we started doing things.
I just wondered how it sat within the wider organisation of 33, the Community Arts Trust, and where there was an intersection between film and video. So that was the film and video group. Kind of, was that funded by the Arts Centre?
When Guerrilla started
Right.
actually earning any money
Mm.
for producing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Guerrilla would hire the facilities from 33 film
Right,
and
so
video.
that's how it worked. So
Yeah.
there was a kind of symbiotic kind of
Yeah,
relationship between the two.
And for example, when we did Invisible Television, we had a budget for that from Channel 4.
So what was Invisible Television?
It was a 1 hour one-off scratch video
Mhm.
show that we made for Channel 4.
So explain about Scratch Video as well.
Oh, well, just let me
All right,
comment.
okay, yeah.
Finish one point
All right.
first. Within that budget, because of the nature of scratch video, we needed a lot of editing facilities. And we could have hired that in London and gone backwards and forwards to London, worked at commercial rates in London. But what we did, we worked out that it was actually cheaper for Channel 4 to buy 33 film and video, a vision mixer,
Right.
and a couple of other bits and pieces to keep in perpetuity. So that's the kind of symbiotic relationship, because then we were going to be editing in there, so
Right.
it benefited everybody
Mm-hmm.
from that point of view. Scratch video itself is just a way of taking found footage and recutting it together and give it a narrative.
Right.
That's the basic principle of what it is. Where it becomes interesting is when you take it to the next degree and say, what is your narrative and what is your found footage? And most people are familiar with it today in terms of like trailers for movies and TV programmes, or for a channel where they'll cut together images from different shows,
Mm-hmm.
tell you what that channel shows you. when we first started doing it, it wasn't really. There were a few people doing it. One significant pair at the time were the Duvet brothers, but they chose to go mainly into straight music.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, Guerrilla decided to mess around with it and be political with it.
Mm-hmm.
And elements of it came out of the miners' strike as well, because we were at that time working with miners' wives groups, the miners, with directly and through other film and video workshops, because collectively the workshops produced what were called the miners' tapes, which covered all the strike at the time. And we were kind of going out and talking to people and showing tapes and saying, what we're doing with this is we're saying to you that what you see on the news is a 2-minute condensation of hours of television.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that that 2 minutes is truly representative of what happened?
Right.
Because we can take that 2 minutes that they showed, recut it, and make it say the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of it in a nutshell, really. That's where it all came from.
But it was scratch video. That wasn't invented by you, or someone did.
I don't know who invented
use
it.
But it came out of scratching records,
Yeah.
DJ scratching.
Yeah.
So it was images sometimes going backwards and forwards.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think it's just rapid cutting
Right.
of images to a
Yeah.
sound, but it's not. It's actually the juxtaposition of those images and what you're saying with
Right.
them, and how you can manipulate them.
So it's kind of making an art of editing video
Yeah.
and sound together, yeah, and manipulating them to make a point.
Yeah.
So, was that commissioned by Channel 4, or did you propose to do that?
We proposed it,
Right.
and they said, "Yeah, we'll go with that."
Mm-hmm. So how did that work was going on as commissions for Channel 4? At the same time, did you have obligations, or were you feeding that work back into what was going on in 33 as part of the film and video group in terms of local people? Did you bring other people in locally to work with you or work alongside you? How did that work?
I don't think we brought that many people in. I mean, there were people who did have a dib in one way or another. I mean, I'm sure Gary was involved at some point. We may have used some music, but I guess really it was our kind of thing between the four of us.
Right.
But Gavin and I certainly were still doing stuff within 33 Film and Video in terms of running
like
it.
You did for me and
yeah.
Mm.
And a lot of what we did with local people was more people who had an idea and wanted to come in and do more.
Mm.
Obviously there were people like Danny Cannon and Dave Arnold who were already working together as a pair and had done work with Dermot, and as they wanted to do more they came in. It was people hiring the facilities as a community group.
Right.
Because we did make distinctions. If somebody wanted 33 Film and Video to go and shoot them a video, we would charge them commercial rates if it was a commercial job.
Right.
If it was a community group or individuals, then they would get charged much less, and in some cases nothing,
Right.
for using the facilities.
Yes.
I
know. I mean, I benefited from that from various projects that I did. Yeah,
and so a lot of people who came in had already got various knowledge, various skills. They could take a camera kit out and go and shoot something, or sit in the edit suite and do what they wanted in the edit suite. And so in those cases it was more monitoring and being there if something went wrong, or
Right.
just as backup support. There were other groups who would come in and say, we want to make a video about this and we don't know anything. What do we do? What do we need? How do we go about it? So we would sit down with them and go through budgets and equipment and scripting and all those kind of things. So it would be giving that kind of backup as well. And that was part of our 33 job.
So one fed the other.
Yeah.
Really, didn't it? Yeah. How was the relationship with Channel 4 particularly established in the first place? Who did that? Was there a process where they just invited people?
Well, they made their announcement. We knew it was coming, so the union had obviously already been discussing it. They invited applications, and so it was a two-track thing. On the one hand we applied, and on the other hand we're working within the union. And we were in the London TV freelance shop at the time, which kind of the whole southeast of England. And they as a shop were very, very supportive and helped us an awful lot to learn the union process, go through that process, how to actually get motions to points where they would be taken seriously. And as I say, the union set up the workshop committee, and that committee worked with Channel 4 to establish the workshop declaration.
And all of that then reflected back because of the name of 33 Film and Video and Gorillas, at various times appeared, and it was known in the local press, and so therefore the Arts Centre had a higher profile because there was an involvement in Channel 4 and all the other things that you were doing, I guess.
I don't know how many local people would have been aware of that side of what 33 did.
Well, I found articles where it was describing the scratch videos being shown and certain things shown on Channel 4, so it must have
once
been
we
covered.
got to that point.
Yeah. Right.
Once that started happening, because I remember when Invisible Television was screened, the night it was screened, the George got a big TV in, didn't they, and basically shut the pub down for everybody except us, and had a private screening of it.
So
which was fabulous.
Yeah,
really good.
So it became good for the centre. It became good for you.
I guess.
But also good for the town as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was it? You say you were out doing these things and so on. I mean, what was your involvement on a kind of a daily basis or with these projects? Was it as a maker, as an administrator, as a union involvement through the union, or what? Or were you doing all those things?
It was all those things really, because when people would come in and want to make something, who didn't know anything, then there were lots of things that we could give them advice on. Whether it be, obviously you're an administrator, so you've got to administrate, you've got to keep the books right, you've got to make sure everything's there.
Right.
But, there was technical support, there was production support, budgeting. Obviously, there would be times when the trade union would come into it and say, well, actually, if you want to do that, you really need to do it this way. And so there was just a whole load of knowledge that we had that we could give to people on a day-to-day basis, just sitting down having a coffee in the cafe or something.
Can you talk about some of the commissions that you had then to do, which brought people into the centre who became involved in the work there?
the 33 Film and Video did certain kinds of commissions. Like as I said, you know, part of our agreement with the council was to do Carnival, and there was the Luton Airport. There were I remember at some point Dermot and I did a job at some kind of Tudor manor house somewhere. I can't remember where it was. I can't remember who it was for. But you know, that was just a standard sort of couple of days shoot commercial job. No big thing about it. There was just us that went off and did it.
Was there? I mean, I saw on some of the videotapes there was something mentioned about a toothpaste commercial, for example. So how did that sit in with it? Who would have worked on that?
Sorry, that wasn't part of that. It was George Collin did that.
Oh, was it? Right, okay.
Yeah, because I
Is there an
don't
animation?
No?
Yeah.
Oh, right. So that was an animation, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah. I mean, commissions that Gorilla did, you know, we did a series of shorts for the Tube on safe sex.
Right.
But again, they were kind of straightforward things that we'd hire the equipment, and if somebody was around and had an idea, and you know, like Gary or Dermot were there, particularly those two.
I seem to remember you got a story about condoms or something like that with that.
Yeah. The difference between then and now. It took me about 3 days, but I had to make a blue cone and then fill it with condoms that were all scrunched up. Attach that to air, so that when you pumped the air in, all the condoms would be... It just took days. Because the difficult bit was getting them all to blow up at the same time without shooting off.
So this was you got this onto the Tube?
I don't know if we got it in there in the end, but
Right.
I think we did about 4 or 5 short pieces on safe sex for them, and that was all part of that.
And the Tube was a rock programme,
Yeah.
you know, famous rock programme on Channel 4 in the 1980s,
Yeah.
So, but they had lots of little clips and things in a part.
And these were just dotted in.
Music and so on.
We did things, Low Pay, No Way, which is basically about what it says, which was very much, that was a young local black group of rappers, I seem to remember, and they came in and did that with us. We made stuff for Artists Against Apartheid.
Right, yes, I've seen
For
that.
that campaign.
What about the thing with Vanessa Redgrave? How did that come about?
I believe that came about through Peter Cox, who was the secretary of the London TV freelance shop. Somebody we worked very closely, and even back then, you know, he was arguing about the Palestinian-Israeli situation. And I believe that she came up with an idea, and he said, I know the perfect people to work with.
So this was there was filming a rally, or what? It was, from what I've read, there was a rally of the various people in the theatre, or their friends or associates, but this was through the Socialist Revolutionary Party or something like that. Workers' Revolutionary Party.
Socialist
Workers'
Workers'
Party.
Right.
Yeah, she was part of that.
Yeah.
And this was a rally that they had to raise money for a memorial to the victims of Stalin in Moscow. But they came to you to film this?
Do you know?
I think she came to
To
part of the editing.
the editing.
Right,
Yeah.
she came to
that
it. Right,
Yeah.
worked, yeah.
I knew Gavin's got that photograph
right.
of it. Yeah, she came down a few times. She's a really nice lady, very nice to work for. Come down in the chauffeur-driven car, and 10 minutes later she's sitting on the floor, you know, just...
And Muddy's sitting there with her chauffeur in the in the car park because he's not allowed to leave the car. Yeah, I mean that's a wonderful story, but I mean it's that material we've got from the rally.
Oh, you've found it?
Yeah, we've found that.
Cool.
So
I'm not sure that I've ever seen it.
No,
Not
so that
finished
must
it.
have been filmed by 33. So
Yeah.
she was coming to help with the
Well,
edit.
not necessarily filmed by us. I'm
right,
not
okay.
sure. I'm really not sure. I remember the edit, but I can't say that I remember the shooting. But then we didn't all do the same thing, so it was perfectly logical for Gavin, Dermot, and or Gary to go off and shoot something while I was back in the office being the girl.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. How was it being the only girl in that setup, as you say?
My favourite story about that is that they'd all gone off on a shoot somewhere and somebody was in editing and one of the machines went wrong. It was one of the low band pneumatics. I said, I think I know what's wrong with that. So I took it apart.
So you dealt with it?
I took it apart.
Yeah.
And the heads just needed a little tweak. And I just got to the point where I was putting the last screws back in and they came back and they stood in the door and went, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "It's fine, I fixed it. What are you doing?" They wouldn't let anybody use it. I took it down to the shop who used to do our servicing work the next day and said, "Can you check this? This why well, Jean took it to pieces." They checked it and said, "Bang on."
Yeah, well, it just shows you. But did you find that, I mean, was there consciously an effort for you to kind of claim your place as part of the team, or was, you know, how did you...
From my point of view, technically, yes.
Right.
And that's why, you know, at the time, we built the edit suite. So I built the edit suite as well. I soldered all the patch bays, I did all those kind of things, helped Faraday cage the film room. So yeah, for me, because I had no background in any of it, it was more important for me to kind of, I think, at least say that I can do it. I can do something. I'm not just a bookkeeper. In some ways it's a bit harder to get over if you've come up with an idea, because you've got anything between 1 and 5 other people all talking at the same time, and sometimes I have to shout. But yeah, I think if you're involved in something like that and you come from a background like mine and you haven't had that kind of college, university, you always feel a little inadequate. You feel a bit of an imposter.
And because of that feeling, your involvement in the union got more, I mean, you were more and more involved, weren't you?
Yeah.
So you became, what kind of level of official in that area?
As I say, started off in the freelance shop, deputy chair. From there, sat on the, always went to general council, always went to annual conference. I sat on the executive committee and the finance and general purposes committee. I mean, there were 8 divisions in the union, and the F&GP had 1 rep from each division, plus your officials. So, yeah, I went quite a long way. Uh,
And he went quite a long way geographically as well as from what
Yeah.
you've said.
it taught me a lot.
Mhm.
Being in the union, it taught me a hell of a lot. And I went to Russia for nearly a month.
What was that like?
That was amazing.
And this was 80s,
Um,
certainly before the Soviet Union broke up. So this was Soviet.
Gorbachev had just come to power, I think.
Right, I wouldn't be able to.
It's
place
all in that. The dates are all on that
Right.
stuff. But yeah, we went to Moscow, Vilnius in Lithuania, and Minsk in Belarus, and then back to
Mhm.
Moscow, and had an absolutely amazing time. We were a guest of the Russian Trade Union
Mhm.
equivalent of the TUC kind of thing, and it was a mixed trip. There were some firemen, there was a woman, there was a big women's strike that went on up north somewhere for years. She was from that, and there was myself and Tudor Gates from ACTT. He's the guy who wrote Barbarella. I went to Russia with him.
Right.
And had an absolutely fabulous time. It was fascinating. And when we were in Vilnius, we ended up being guests of the local art house to see 2 evenings of the Spanish National Ballet.
Wow.
And I'd never ever been to the ballet before. And by the time we got back to Moscow, Tudor had made some phone calls and had got us 2 tickets to an evening at the Bolshoi,
Wow.
which was a commemorative evening. As one of the big, great teachers was retiring. And so they had, right from the littlest ones up to the current and a few of the retired ones, all doing an evening of performance for this woman, which was nationally televised across Russia. And that was an amazing thing to do. It's just one of those things. You know?
I mean, one of
One of
those things
those
that's quite an
things.
experience. I mean, you said something about someone was attached to you from
Oh yes,
KGB.
our minders.
Oh yeah.
Our minders.
What was that like?
Well, that was all right, really. You kind of got used to them quite quickly, and then you worked out where the taxi rank were and how to get to the exits. And then when they went to the toilet, you all ran. And you got in the taxi and said, "Red Square," and off you went.
Right.
And then they told us off when we went
Right.
back, and we just said, "Fine, that's
Okay.
okay." Not a lot you can do about it. They lost me in the Kremlin.
Oh right.
Yeah.
How did you get lost in the Kremlin?
We'd kind of done the tour, been around the churches, and I was wearing a bright green fur coat and green boots and red hair, and I sort of said, "Oh, I'm just going to go and take a picture of that." And when I came back, couldn't find anybody, so I just went on a wander and kind of wandered around the Kremlin for a couple of hours.
And no one stopped you?
Nobody stopped me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I took a few pictures, as you do. And then when I came back to the cathedral square, they were in a total panic. "Where have you been?" I was just having a walk.
Mm.
But yeah, it's.
But that's an amazing experience. I mean, and did you think, did you catch yourself at any point thinking, how on earth did I end up here?
Probably. Well, I'd kind of got used to it by then.
You had, right.
Yeah.
Mm.
I end up in places. But they also. I went round various parts of the country visiting workshops or going to union meetings and things like that. They also sent me to Hungary and Finland as part of FISTAV, which was the International kind of Film and Television Federation. And which did I go to first? I think I went to Finland first, to Helsinki, and that was at the time of the big news strike, the ITV breakfast show strike. And Alan Sapper, our General Secretary, was the chair of FISTAB at the time, and he wouldn't leave the country because of the dispute that was going on. And he said to me, "You have to go." He said, "There's a thing on the agenda for an international women's conference, just make sure it goes through." Okay. So we went off to Finland, had a wonderful time there. Got the conference through, so that was fine. Another time they sent me to the conference in Budapest with the I had to present a joint motion on the defence of public service broadcasting. Went off, did that. That was cool. Had lots of fun at those things because there weren't a lot of women around at the time.
I was going to say, I mean, that again, as a woman in that fairly macho kind of world of the unions of the 1980s, who had quite a lot of power at the time, how did you get on? Because of course the perception is, oh, it's very left-wing and welcoming and so on, but the reality, what was the reality like for you?
The Greeks.
So tell us about the Greeks then.
The Greek delegation, there was about 4 or 5 of them, always. And the eldest one was Papa, who looked a bit like Rasputin and had been in the resistance up in the mountains and really thought that women should be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen kind of thing.
Okay.
And then the youngest one was a film director from Thessalonica. His name I can't remember, but was an extremely charming young man. And I think I met them first in Helsinki, and we just got on fine. And then when we were in Budapest, they were there again, and I had to chair a regional group meeting, of which Greece was part of our group, and we were adopting new what do you call them? The way you behave in meetings, I've forgotten the word right now.
Protocols.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
And one of them was a smoking ban in meetings, because the Greeks just chain smoke. And I'd been dumped on this again by Alan Sapper.
Okay.
And, you know, they were and it was one of the, you knew it was going to go through. It was just going to go through, because that's what everybody was doing at that point. And I said, look, you know, you got a choice. You can either vote for it and we can just get on with what we're doing, or you can argue about it and we'll still end up voting for it, or you can move a vote for no confidence in me, or you can leave. And they got up and left. Just got up and left. Okay, fine. Thing got passed. When we came out after the meeting, at the end of the meeting, they were sitting in the bar with this huge tray of drinks and just grabbed me and said, "Come drink with us!"
So you won some respect.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean, that was the same one when I walked in and the Russian come up, grabbed me, spun me round in there and said, "Hello, princess!" Yeah, it's, I did win respect, but I guess it was still as a woman.
But yeah, so expand on that.
Well, not playing it like a man.
Right.
Not being a bully. Just saying, you know, this is how it is. You know, what do you want to do about it?
Right.
Those are your choices.
So on your own terms, rather than adopt a kind of
but
behaviour of
that's actually
some of your
something that
colleagues.
the union gave me by kind of, you know, I had a few training courses in there about being a shop steward and this kind of thing. So,
Right.
and then having to get up at conferences and stuff and propose motions, it does give you a kind of confidence that I don't think I would have got in other ways. And it stood me in good stead in a lot of ways.
So that's a lot. That's such a wide number of experiences you were having through that. And I remember you acted for me in at least 2 productions, I think, with Muddy and that. So, had you ever thought you'd be doing some acting work as well and appearing on camera and on stage?
No, I don't like being on camera.
I can tell. But, had you done any acting before? Because
no.
No. But you seem to be fairly comfortable with that, because you worked on with me. I don't know if you remember, but I was working with an unemployed drama group. So it was people who were unemployed came in and did a drama course and so on. And we worked up a play, and you were part of that. And we also filmed it too. And then there was a second half play that was part of something I'd written because I was at college. But you helped with that. Muddy was in that, and lots of people got involved in that. So you ended up doing that. Had you done any acting before? Because you seem to be fairly
only
natural.
in terms of silly stuff that when we were doing arts in the park or going out onto St George's Square with the equipment and measuring the pigeons and all that kind of thing.
Right.
No.
Oh, that normal
But that's
kind of
part
stuff.
of
But, yeah.
what being involved with 33 was.
It was all encompassing.
Yeah.
You just mucked in.
Yeah.
Then yeah.
That day we'd got a pile of equipment, whole technical equipment, and we were bored. We got some white suits, hadn't we, and clipboards. And we all suited up, grabbed the equipment, marched around to St George's Square, started poking probes into the crowd. People just kept coming up and asking us what we were doing.
And that was just part of it, yeah. And you worked with. I know you helped with. There was some filming of, say, for example, the People Show.
Yeah.
When they visited too, so you're involved in sort of quite prestigious sort of theatre groups that were performing at 33 too. So there was a lot of different things. Music as well. Band. Talk about bands. Filming bands.
UKDK. Yucky Ducky. Werewolf. Great video.
So they were, just explain for the archive who were UKDK.
UKDK, very prominent Luton band, really, very well known band.
Would you describe them as punk?
Yeah,
about
punk
78, 79, something like that.
Probably been around from then.
Mm-hmm.
But there were musicians in and out of 33 all the time. UKDK, Click Click, lots and lots of other bands, because there were the rehearsal rooms there.
And they wanted videos made that they actually used as promotion for their music.
I mean, Werewolf became a bit of an icon video at that point. And we did all sorts of work with them, at different gigs and stuff. In fact, in some of that stuff, there's postcards from them when they were off in different places, and Eddie, what was Eddie's surname? Newstead, yeah. Did some work with him, and again there was lots of cross fertilisation, because I think Eddie and I'm not sure whether it was Click Click or UKDK, did some work with them. And the thing is, there is so much stuff that you just did on a day-to-day basis, and names that just fell off your lips at the time, that unless you've actually got something written down somewhere, it's so hard to... Actually, it's like I said, there's a list of names there, and I have no idea who most of those people are, but they're all people who in one way or another use the facility there.
And you worked with them, yeah.
And we worked with them.
What were the buildings like? Because there's, tell me about the original setup, because I know that there was from the history, there was a rebuilding of the video unit.
Yeah.
And there was a ceiling collapsing or something. It was raining ingress or something like that. So what was the original setup, and then what did it become?
Because the main part was once 35 was taken over, and that upstairs part became photography and then film and video above the office when it was at the front. And to be honest, I can't remember anything before that. So don't ask me.
But it was, would you say it was sort of controlled chaos? I mean, my memory of it, it was lots and lots of tapes everywhere, lots of equipment.
Where did you get the idea there was control? I spent an awful lot of time trying to keep them guys to put cables back in the right places. When I'd cleared my desk, not to let me come in and find it covered in cracks and soldering irons and things the next morning.
Okay.
You know, yeah. There was a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there was a certain level of organisation underneath it all, and it functioned.
And generally, do you look back on that time fondly?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Did it make a difference to your life? I mean, what did you do afterwards? I mean, when did you leave, and what did you do afterwards then?
Well, I actually left 33 when I went to work for JobFit.
Right.
Which was the Joint Board for Film Industry Training, which was set up between the ACTT, the ITV companies, Channel 4 and the advertising companies, and it was set up specifically to train new technicians. And we covered directing, production, editing, sound. What else did we do? I think there was 6 things that we did. But it was a 2-year course, and there would only be 12 people taken on each course. And we started 2 a year, so the first one would start and they would do so many weeks training in a college purely on the technical aspects of things, and then we would put them on industry placements across the disciplines that we worked in, and the idea was that they would work on at least one production in each discipline. Then they would have a second bout of college training where they would also work on a production, and then the final part of it would be to choose their specialist area to work in, and then we would attempt to get all their industry placements within that area. And then at the end of it, the 2 years, they would graduate.
And what was your role in the
I was the deputy director, and my specific role was to organise the industry placements. And I mean, obviously we had 2 interview sessions a year and take on 2 groups a year, so I used to organise the interviews because everybody had to be interviewed by a panel from the relevant bodies, the interested people, and it was a national scheme, and we used to get about 1,800 applications every time we advertised, because it was one of the first non kind of like national film school type programs for training out there, and it was very successful. It was a very successful scheme. We got, because each movie had to pay a levy, or television show or whatever had to pay a levy of a percentage of their budget to JobFit to pay for this, because trainees were paid while they were in training as well. And pretty much everything signed up to it, and some would bitch about it, but eventually they'd pay up, and some of them just point blank refused to actually take trainees on their productions.
Mhm.
But on the whole, we had enough going to keep 24 trainees in production placements all the time.
Well, that's good. How long did that last?
I worked there for just over 2 years.
Mhm.
I said I'd work there for 2 years and then they could get on with it, and that's what I did.
Mhm.
So I walked away after 2 years.
And then what did you do?
Packed up my life, got on an airplane and went to California.
So you went to America and had a different life.
Had a different
Probably a very long story, but but would you say then that that kind of career path, you know, some of that at least you owed to the fact that you could go into 33, do anything that you wanted, that you fancied and everything, and it gave you connections and
absolutely.
opportunities?
Absolutely.
Mm.
I don't know what I would be now,
Mm.
or where I would be, or if I'd be any. Obviously would be different, but I think my path would have taken a very different route. I'd have either found something quite outrageous to do or become incredibly normal. I might have even become an MP. Instead of Diana, but
that's an interesting kind of alternative timeline we could explore.
There was a point in ACTT when Blair was being elected, and the Labour Party wanted a lot of new women in it,
Mm-hmm.
and the union approached me about standing as an MP with their backing.
You weren't keen on the idea.
So instead, they backed Diane Abbott.
Right. Okay.